Hi, everyone. Welcome to an ideal system of literacy support in secondary settings, a webinar presented by Storyshares and Hill for Literacy. My name is Melanie McDermott. I'm the Director of Marketing and Outreach here at Storyshares, and I also head up our webinar series. I'm so excited to welcome you to this very important conversation today with two brilliant literacy experts who just so happen to share a name, Shira Engel from Storyshares and Shira Cohen-Goldberg from Hill for Literacy. Um, we're going to be diving into a transformational approach to supporting adolescent readers. And we're so excited about this conversation. And we can tell that you are too, based on so many of your responses to the registration question, what does an ideal system of literacy support look like? I wanted to ground our conversation in some of the ideas that our fellow educators shared, because it's so validating to hear from others who are experiencing the same struggle. How do we connect the dots in order to create real change for our older striving readers? So, something we heard a lot is that many teachers are looking for a clear structure of how to support students in their literacy needs. You're looking for intentional, coordinated, data-based instruction. You want to meet students with the tools that they need at their instructional level. You want something that's more flexible than our current system. And so many of you said that you want a system where all teachers are supporting literacy, not just ELA teachers or reading interventionists. Um, so it's exciting to hear how much this aligns with the conversation that we're going to be having today. And we're excited to dive in. First up, just a quick overview of what to expect. I'm going to go through a couple of logistics. I'll introduce our panelists, and then we'll dive into the content. Part one is going to be the current state of adolescent literacy. Part two is going to be how we center students in this new approach to adolescent literacy. And then part three is going to be our nuanced solution that we call Elevate. And then at the end, we will hopefully have time for a Q&A, and then we'll do a closing that has a couple of concrete next steps that you can take. Just a housekeeping thing. The only way that we're able to communicate with you in this webinar format is if you use the Q&A button. And if you use that button, then it'll send your question to the three of us and we'll be able to see it. We might respond to it just by typing back to you, or we might save your question for the end if it feels relevant for the whole audience. If you have a question and you ask it and we don't get a chance to get to it, please email us. I'll share our emails at the end. And we can respond that way. Okay, before we dive in, I wanted to see who's out there today. So I'm going to do a quick poll. What age group do you work with? All right, that should pop up on everyone's screens. Okay, seeing a 50-50 split of middle high school or mixed age group. It looks like it's actually very, very evenly split amongst middle school, high school, and mixed age group. Cool. Exciting. Looks like most of you have shared. So welcome, everyone. Great to have you here. Okay. Now, let's meet our panelists. First up, Shira Engel from Storyshares. Would love to have you introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Shira. I am the Chief Academic Officer at Storyshares. I'm also a dyslexia specialist, and I come to this work from being a former middle school humanities teacher turned interventionist. I'll share a little bit more about this later, but I had the experience on my very first day of teaching middle school ELA and middle school humanities, where I had a group of students who were struggling to sound out single syllable words. And I panicked. I did not know what to do to support them at the time. And so the rest of my career to date has been really defined by figuring out how to support those students in age appropriate and relevant ways. And at Storyshares, I work on our professional learning programs, our partnership with the Hill for Literacy, our intervention program, LIFT. And we are a small and nimble company, so a whole lot of other things as well. And it's really nice to be here with all of you.
Awesome. Welcome. And then Shira Cohen-Goldberg from Hill for Literacy. Let's hear a little bit about you.
Yeah, so Hello, and thank you for having me. I'm Shira Cohen-Goldberg, Shira CG, Director of Client Services at Hill for Literacy, and I'm delighted to be here. I was a major in English literature in college and really felt passionately that I wanted to bring this amazing text to others and really felt that it was magical and wanted to sprinkle the magic to high school and middle school students. But I came to find out that the students that I wanted to inspire did not know how to unlock the text in front of them. And so this brought me to pursue my master's in reading so that I could share and unlock, along with students, some of the knowledge I needed in order to work with them. So fast forward 25 years, and I've been working at Hill for Literacy, coaching teachers and administrators to not only teach these foundational building blocks, but also in building equitable school and district-wide multi-tier systems of support. And what we really want to do is empower teachers to do what they do best, what you all do best, and what you love the most, which is teaching kids. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you both here today. Thank you for leading this conversation. One last thing before we dive in, I wanted to give a little bit of background about both of our organizations. So, Storyshares is a literacy organization that was founded by a former middle school teacher who saw a gap in the materials that she needed for her older striving readers. She didn't have any books or relevant content for them, and so she started Storyshares to meet that need. At Storyshares, we know that school doesn't end in third grade, and literacy instruction doesn't need to either. So our goal is to really reimagine what literacy instruction looks like in grades 3 and beyond. And the way that we do that is by creating books and resources that really center striving readers and their interests and create content that really sparks curiosity and confidence. And then we also empower educators of older striving readers with really responsive training and resources to be able to support every step of the way. So that's Story Shares. And then Shira CG would love to hear about Hill for Literacy.
Yeah, so Help for Literacy, we are striving to create a world where every child is a reader, and we've been transforming reading outcomes for over 2 decades. And so our goals here are to provide every child with the power and joy of reading. Also, along with our friends, Storyshares, to empower educators to unlock literacy for every student K to 12, and to build strong partnerships that advance literacy and equity.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. So now we can really dive in. I'm going to hand the mic off to Shira E, who's going to frame up the challenge that we are, many of us, all experiencing.
So, thank you. I'm going to start off with just a little bit more of my own experience with the caveat that it is one experience, and I'm sharing it in case it feels familiar to others, and because I think that there are elements of the experience of every teacher working with older students who are working on those foundational reading skills without necessarily a system to support them. That are similar because this challenge is a systemic challenge. And we're going to touch on that and go deeper into that later as well. But I do think that it is important to situate ourselves within a larger system because it's not a teacher problem, it's not a student problem, it's not an intervention problem even. Like this is a systems-wide challenge. So when I taught my first class of middle school students, I was fresh out of a master's program in secondary English education. I knew how to teach my students how to write a literary analysis essay. I could teach them how to identify and really take advantage of informational text structures to deepen comprehension. I could teach them how to read To Kill a Mock or how to analyze To Kill a Mockingbird. I was so excited. And Shira CG, I heard a lot of this in your intro too. I was so excited to share those things with my students. And I believed that my biggest love in teaching was teaching literature. And then I looked at the students in front of me, and I had several students who were completely brilliant, and their brilliance really showed. I mean, I believe all my students were brilliant in many different ways, but my students who sat in the back of the classroom and used every single coping mechanism and compensatory strategy in the book to make it seem like they were reading, even though they could not decode. That was a level of brilliance that they had learned throughout their whole elementary career of getting by without being able to decode. And they had a very different challenge than early elementary school students who were learning to read for the first time. And at the time, I had no idea how to support them. I did not know how to teach anyone how to read from scratch. And in fact, the few resources that I had on how to teach foundational reading skills were not evidence-based, and I saw pretty quickly how problematic they were to use with my students. Um, I was really lucky, and I do think that this is why this is like a system-wide problem as well. But I was working in the New York City Department of Education during a time when there was a spotlight on middle school literacy. And I was trained up in a lot of different programs. And I was trained in some really phenomenal intervention programs as well. There were some really wonderful strategies that I was able to use with my students. I did not have texts that made them feel to make them feel appropriate for their age group. And I was using these strategies without a ton of guidance on how to teach them. And so there were all of these pieces of the puzzle that I did not quite know how to put together. There was the professional learning that I was getting as someone who was brand new to teaching literacy. There was the curriculum that I was given, both for core instruction and for intervention. And I didn't know how to put them together. I often shared that I felt like I was living a double life, like I was teaching my core ELA class, and my students were. If I felt like I was living a double life, like my students must have felt that like tenfold. I was teaching my core curriculum class. I was using like an amazing high quality um, curriculum. And then I was using another amazing high quality curriculum for intervention. And I did not know how to put those together so that it would feel really coherent for my students. And then I had a lot of really great programs for teaching foundational reading skills that were created for second graders. And the programs were wonderful, but I didn't really know how to apply them and make them relevant to my very legitimately frustrated students. Like they had every right to be frustrated that they were being given materials for a second grader. That is actually how I eventually came to find Storyshares, was through that experience. But I do want to pose this much broader question to you, Shira CG, and to our panelists, and to not our panelists, and to our attendees as well, just to think on, because this was something that I think was a challenge I didn't expect. Like, I feel like I was told high quality instructional materials will change the game. Period. Stop. Like that is how we will make change. And that wasn't the case for me, and I don't think that's the case for a lot of other educators. So why aren't high quality instructional materials enough to support older striving readers? I would love for us to start by having that conversation.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Shira E. And I want to just respond by providing the group a little bit of validation of Shira, what you have expressed, and likely what other folks in the out there have felt. So maybe we'll go on, and I'll start talking about where I'll give you some stats that may validate what you're feeling. And so what you can see is this is from the RAND American teacher panel 2024. 1,483 teachers in grades 3 to 8 across the country have shared these things. The folks experienced that around 44% of their students always or nearly always experience difficulty reading the written content within their instructional materials. Okay, so we have high quality instructional materials and we have students who are experiencing quite a lot of difficulty within those materials. Then we have this idea that that 3/4 of these teachers said they need access to more resources to identify and support students with reading difficulties. So what do we mean by resources? I'll talk about that in a sec. And half of teachers in grades 3 to 8 report that their primary source of knowledge about reading instruction comes from teaching and trying and doing and teaching and trying. And so I think that there's two really key pieces that come out of this, and then actually three pieces. One of them speaks to the training that is necessary for teachers of secondary students who don't often learn that stuff as they're going through their teacher training professional programs. The next one is time, and there's never enough time, right? But what we know from research is that students generally, adolescent readers, need to be engaged in text for around 2 hours daily. So, like, how is that happening? The school day is not filled with reading classes, not even close. Maybe there's never a reading class. And so the question is how we get there. It has to be a group effort. And I think what we're going to want to do is kind of try to parse out what is that group effort. Because I think y'all know for sure that, like, if I'm a science teacher, please don't expect me to teach foundational reading skills in my classroom. That is not what I'm there for. And that was a problem that those kids had earlier on, and now I'm inheriting the problem. No. So let's think about how one might build a system to kind of connect the dots between training, time, and student learning. So now that we've named the problem, and I hope that this that folks are nodding their heads. Yes, we're experiencing this. We're experiencing this. Let's talk about how we conceived of a journey to work through that problem.
So I would love to actually just start off by reading this quote out loud. We have used this quote in webinars before, and we continue to use it because it is, I think, really relevant to the adolescent literacy journey in particular. Adolescent literacy is a shifting landscape where the heights get higher, the inclines steeper, and the terrain rockier. And and this is from A Time to Act, an agenda for advancing adolescent literacy for college and career success. And we can always follow up with the resource. But when I look at this quote, I think of all that we are trying to get older students to do at the exact same time. And how urgent this challenge is for older students. Literacy is urgent for students of all ages. Literacy I once went to an amazing professional development session with the late Kylene Beers, and she had us define literacy, and then she like crossed off everyone's definitions, and she was like, literacy equals power and privilege. And that really, I think, stuck with me. But literacy is urgent for everyone. And for teenagers, that urgency looks really different because of exactly what Shira CG mentioned. In science, they are being expected to read articles and to write lab reports and to engage with the written word in a very content specific and disciplinary way. They are being asked to do the same in social studies. They're being asked to do that when they read complex word problems and have to solve them in math. The demands of literacy are already there. While for our older striving readers, they are still learning the skills that allow them to tackle those challenges in the first place. And so when I see this about a steeper incline and a rockier terrain, that is what I think of. And how, when we talk about a system, we're talking really about a system of supports because if that falls solely on the student, they're not going to get the instruction to be where they need to be. If that falls solely on the teacher and the teacher is a science teacher and maybe does not have the training in teaching foundational literacy skills, or if they're like me, an ELA teacher and does not have the training in teaching foundational literacy skills, how are they able to do that and differentiate instruction and support their older striving readers? And something that came up, Shira CG, when we were planning this, which I have thought about a lot and found fascinating, is that teaching middle school, like you're very much so in the middle. And I'm not proud of this at all, but I would sometimes for my older striving readers, I would be like, they should have gotten this instruction in elementary school. And then I would talk to high school teachers, and the high school teachers would say they should have gotten this instruction in middle school. And then when I was talking to you, Shira, like you, I think mentioned teaching fourth grade and being like, they should have gotten this instruction in third grade. And so when we like that mentality around literacy, is I think very pervasive and ignores the fact, even though we all like so many people do it, that this is a systems challenge. And if we address one piece of the puzzle, we are not going to support the whole system. And something that we realized at Storyshares, which we'll talk about when we made with the Hill for Literacy, we made a curriculum that centered the experiences of teenagers, of older striving readers. And we realized that even that wasn't enough, that we had to do more so that we would not only view this as a system-wide issue, but so that we could view this as something that could be solved with a clear system of supports. So I am going to pass this back to Shira CG to talk about that system of supports and why that is so important for those older striving readers.
Okay, thanks, Shira E. Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. There's always an upstream situation that we as teachers of whatever age students always look and are like, why didn't they get what they were supposed to get in earlier years? And that's not really for us to answer because the students in front of us are the students in front of us. Whatever happened, it's not their fault. And we're not blaming. We're trying to figure out how to work through and solve this problem. So here we can see this beautiful triangle that's brought to us by Shanahan and Shanahan. And it depicts the stages of reading for adolescent learners. And you can see that really steep uphill climb from basic literacy to intermediate literacy to disciplinary literacy. Emphasizing that this is where we have to get our students in middle and high school. I think that it's just important to kind of ground us in this idea that before 2004, most of the reading research focused on early literacy. And what we have learned is that even students who read well early and who have basic reading skills, they don't automatically grow or translate or ascend into more advanced subject-specific literacy skills. And those skills need to be taught. And it's because it's something that content area teachers directly support. And so it's good that we have clearer guidance. And it's good that we have these high quality instructional materials. And now I want to talk a little bit more about how we can kind of kickstart ourselves into something that's more of a system now that we have some of the pieces in place. Um, so we have the high quality instructional materials, and we have this amazing group of colleagues who wants to support their students and who wants to build their student skills towards being very skillful in the discipline, in the content area class. And so I want to bring up these different components to a system where in Hill for Literacy, we think a lot about multi-tiered systems of support and how to include all of these important pieces. So we have distributed leadership, which means everybody's working towards a common goal, and we're aware of what that common goal is. And here our common goal is getting every student to understand the text that is taught in their discipline and getting them to gain content knowledge. And so we move there to distributed knowledge, and this is distributed knowledge amongst faculty. So even content area teachers need an awareness of the importance of disciplinary literacy and to understand the specific needs of their striving learners and everybody else. And so from here, we want to build a common language, which is really amongst this team of faculty who want to support students. It's a way of talking about literacy so that we're all in sync with each other around where kids are now and where they need to be. And so it's not the only thing that we're saying commonly is saying, well, what did that teacher in a prior grade do, right? We're saying, how can we work together to build? An aligned methodology is then how are we teaching text in our discipline? And do we have aligned expectations, as well as ways to scaffold rigorous instruction for all students? And then it's the instructional time. And it may not be that more time in the schedule is needed. In fact, that's rarely possible in a secondary setting. But meaningful and informed instruction of text in your content area counts. And so if we can think about what this beautiful system would look like, then we're getting there. I think that it's going to be important here, though, to zoom in on the student, because our striving students are really at the center of what we're talking about here. And so how, Shira, are you thinking about centering striving students in general as they experience these challenging texts?
Thank you. I think that frames and I love that visual. Actually, I'm so sorry, Melanie. Can you go back to that last one? Like when I was hearing you talk about this, Shira CG, I was literally picturing students at the center of this image and what that looks like. These are all puzzle pieces that have to connect for teachers, for administrators, for school communities, between professional learning providers and curriculum developers and the teachers themselves. And as long as they lock and connect in that way, we can truly center students. And to center older students in particular, I believe, and we believe this strongly at Storyshares, this is the foundation of everything that we do, but to center those older striving readers, we have to center engagement for them. There is a certain extent to which engagement is baked into foundational literacy materials for much younger students, because those are often the intended ages for those materials, and there's often less baggage associated with learning to read for a kindergarten student than there is for a ninth grader who is learning those foundational reading skills. And so I say this with like a great deal of sensitivity. And as someone who has not always provided this, because I did not know they existed and I did not know where to find them. But I think the least we can do is provide older striving readers with engaging and relevant texts that really center them in their experiences and their interests, as we do all of these other things. And if we're able to center that engagement for older students, if we're able to develop teacher training, responsive coaching, leadership support, and systems level change with those students, their interests, their needs in mind, and developing the materials for all of those things with them in mind, then we stop retrofitting curricula, programs, foundational literacy supports that were made for students in grades K to 2, like for a 14-year-old. Older students like are phenomenal at knowing when something was not made with them in mind. Um, and I think that there's an extent to which they can feel that, even if there is like where they can feel it in such a top-down way, even if the systems level change was not made with them in mind, that will trickle down to the student feeling that. And I think that the reverse is also true. And we've really learned through our work in schools that the reverse is true. If we do the systems level change, if we do the systems level work, which means we are supporting school leaders with understanding their students' assessment data, with finding curricula and instructional routines that are really relevant for their older students, we're then able to work with the administrators to find teachers that would really benefit from responsive coaching. And when I say responsive, I mean like with working with the teachers in a way that also works with the students who are in front of them. So not coming from a one size fits all, this is the approach, but looking at who are your students? What do they need? What do they like? What are they like? What are they interested in? What are they good at? How can we leverage that in their literacy support? And then how can we coach teachers from that standpoint? And then same with teacher training. How can we bring all the teachers who are supporting students with literacy, which is all teachers are supporting students with literacy across all content areas together, to make this feel like a real joint project when we can do all of those things that in a way that centers teens, then the teens feel that as well. And that creates more buy-in for them to progress in their own literacy journeys in a meaningful way.
So, Shira, I really appreciate everything that you've outlined. And I think that one thing that occurs to me is this idea as we center students of understanding what their day looks like. What is the instructional menu that striving students are getting? So they have 45 minutes in reading class where they're working on one set of skills, and then they have 45 minutes in science. And is there a connective opportunity for them to apply the skills that they've learned in reading class? And then they go over to English class, and both is there a connective opportunity for them to align what they've learned in reading class, but also they're reading in two different disciplines. Are they using the same way to process text? Is one teacher using a graphic organizer that looks like this and another teacher using a graphic organizer that looks like this? Are we using a multitude of different routines? And what does that feel like as a student who's going through their day, not only struggling with the text in front of them, not only struggling to master the content area, the content, but also struggling to adjust to each methodology that they're exposed to in each content area class. So when we center students, we really have to think about what is their experience and create a coherent experience for them. So we pose problems, we talk about solutions, but Shira, I wondered if you might share what we came up with, trying to think through all these different facets of these challenges.
So we mentioned, and we'll share more about this later. We worked at Storyshares. We worked with the Hill for Literacy to create LIFT, our Literacy Intervention for Teens program, a program that centers relevant and engaging texts for older striving readers and uses the Hill for Literacy's evidence-based instructional routines to teach them decoding and fluency skills. Thank you, Melanie. I also might eventually have you go back to that other one, but this is perfect. So we created Lift because we heard about the need for cohesive teen intervention that really centers the experiences of older students, that's not retrofitting a program for grades, K to 2, or saying like this is a program for grades 2 to 12, like really just like looking at something that was targeted for older students, beginning with the texts themselves, but really making sure that everything worked for those older students. And the challenge of that is exactly what Shira CG talked about, which is intervention can often in school communities happen in silos. It maybe happens after school. It maybe happens during a dedicated intervention block if the school is lucky enough for that. It can happen during tier 2 instruction during the ELA period. And just like a side note, a huge part of what we do in our coaching is we have to think so creatively when it comes to that school day for older students, because there is not a blueprint for this that is like precisely laid out, because the school day looks different around secondary schools, like across the board. And like what happens so much of the time is that there often isn't time for intervention. There isn't time for sometimes even PD for around this stuff. And there is very often not time for the interventionist to talk to the core curriculum teachers, like for that back and forth to happen. And so one of the things that we do is we have to think really creatively about when this happens during the school day. Anyways, that's all to say that we made an intervention program. We love it. We feel really like strongly about how we have centered and proud of how we've centered older students in every single instructional material in this program, from the letter sound cards to the books, to the instructional routines, even to the corrective feedback and the pacing, like that all really center engagement for those older striving readers. And we let that out into the world and found out that wasn't enough. That we needed to support schools in how to actually implement a program like this. And then we also needed to, like Shira CG said, create coherence for the students so that they weren't, and I do think this happens often. Like I used to have this happen. I had a student that I was teaching to read once with like a tier 3 intervention, super, super intense intervention. And he learned to read. He was reading fluently in my intervention. And then I heard from his science teacher that he still wasn't reading in science class and it wasn't translating. And so in order to create a system where students are not only reading in their intervention, but they're also accessing grade level text, we had to pull back a bit and look at what a broader system of support looks like. And so the solution that we came up with amongst our 2 organizations is to really bring together those high quality instructional materials, thank you, and training for all teachers and support for all administrators, and to go on site so that we are really working with schools and partnering with schools so that we're not prescribing a one size fits all solution. We are instead really responding to what the need is on the ground. And that includes everything that you see here and more. So I'll just touch on this very quickly, and Shira CG, let me know if I'm leaving anything out or missing anything here. But as we mentioned, we set out to create a literacy intervention program that really centered the experiences, interests, and abilities of older striving readers. And then we're doing everything else around that program to center the needs and requests, and demands and capacities of their teachers as well. And we are not doing this in a silo. The goal is to not do any of this literacy work in a silo anymore. So we are really basing this off the Institute for Education Sciences has recommendations for reading intervention. And we have designed Lift with these recommendations at the very heart of the instructional part of this program to really look at building students' decoding skills so that they can read complex multisyllabic words, looking at what makes that different for older students than for younger students, providing those purposeful fluency building activities, routinely using a like I do believe the key word there is routinely, because we can do it across content areas if it's a routine of comprehension and knowledge building practices, and providing students with opportunities to practice making sense of a stretch of text. Um, and we don't want this to only be the job of the interventionists. We want students to get all 4 hours of reading that they are supposed to get in that school day. And as a result, we are layering on a lot of professional learning to this solution as well, so that we can offer schools and students something that feels really comprehensive and coherent. So I'm going to pass it on to Shira CG to talk a little bit about the professional learning piece.
Yeah, sure. So, so this whole structure is built around the idea that providing students with a multi-tiered system of support is the way to provide or is the way to get to instructional equity for students. Access is equity, and we're working towards that. And so what I wanted to share is these supportive structures that we know enable folks working directly with students in the classroom to be very effective for implementing these high quality instructional materials. And so we offer several of these components that we have integrated with Storyshares to build this bigger system. We have what's called Intervention for Striving Readers training. And this training enables educators to truly implement the LIFT program. It offers the methodology behind the LIFT program, specific practice in instructional routines that the LIFT program materials have, the lesson plans. Yeah, and so that's what it does. So this basically refers back to that idea that high quality instructional materials aren't enough, and that training is extraordinarily important. And this training is very targeted to that specific, the LIFT intervention.
Can I just say something that I think is so awesome about that training, that we're getting a lot
Yeah.
of really positive feedback from teachers who are using it? The teachers using it then get to see educators use the routines in their real classrooms with real students as part of that training. And so it brings the intervention to life in a way where the first time they're seeing the routine is not when they are the ones doing it with their students. They're able to see it modeled, which I think is really special.
Thanks, Shira. Um, some of the other components of the Elevate program have to do with what is it the content area teachers need to know. And how do you build that coherence across the school day for your striving students? And so what this is a 10-part professional learning series that is content agnostic, but that really situates what are the unique challenges of secondary students. And then how do we move through teaching content area literacy using really explicit instructional routines that can, for vocabulary and comprehension and knowledge building, that can be aligned throughout the content area instruction, so that that student is getting the same instructional routine in biology class and in English literature and in calculus, if depending upon how much reading there is, etc. So beyond this, interdisciplinary professional learning implementation. So now that we have this training, what does that look like for me specifically with the students in front of me? And we offer implementation sessions where we really work together to figure some of those things out, to connect the dots between what I've learned, what I do, and who are these students in front of me. And then finally here, this like sort of moves up to a greater leadership level. How do we think about our student data and what that means for our instruction? So there's a variety of instructional work that we have to do at the literacy leadership level. And this mini series provides literacy leaders, whoever these are, right? Administrators, sometimes reading coaches, sometimes department chairs, to provide this sort of big picture way of linking data to instruction. So, and then I think, Shira, you're going to talk a little bit more about coaching and site visits. And then I think we're on to Q&A. So if people have questions, please put them out there because we're really excited to like answer questions while standing on one foot, as they say. So.
Yeah, Shira CG, definitely jump in because these are, if there's anything that you would like to share from the Hill side of things. One, in looking at a system-wide solution, like one of the reasons why our organizations are partnering for this Elevate solution is because we bring different things to the table, and we know that that schools who want to really transform literacy for their older students would benefit from all of it and need all of it. So in that vein, we offer really responsive coaching to teachers, and then we also offer up a train the trainer model too. So we sometimes work with schools that have a literacy coach in the building. And this is actually how our partnership began. We worked with an after school and summer literacy program that had a literacy coordinator and coach. And we coached that coach, and then that coach coached the teachers who were working on the ground. And so we do it in all different ways. We could do it with a train the trainer model or with individual teachers. And we really support with responsive guidance. We look at what's coming up for schools and for those teachers in particular, and for those students, we're able to look at examples of student work and student data. And then the Hill for Literacy really focuses on those powerful instructional routines, either across the curriculum or specifically through LIFT. And then what we do at Storyshares is we really try to focus on bringing the books to life and making sure that students have access to books that meet them at their intersection of ability and interest, so that they are getting the engagement from the stories, and that the stories are also supportive of the skills that they are developing in their literacy journeys, whether it's decoding, fluency, a very specific element of comprehension like understanding conflict. We really want to make sure that the materials themselves are doing a lot of that engagement work and a little bit of a little bit of that instruction too, that they're able to get that practice, that really key element of practice through the books. Anything else that you wanted to bring up, Shira CG, with the coaching piece?
I mean, I just want to say that in our experience, this instructional change takes a lot of time and a lot of work. Also, in our experience, what doesn't yield change is folks from the outside coming in and doing instructional walkthroughs and then providing a list of recommendations, which you may or may not want to follow or understand the relevance. And so as we think about the importance of coaching, it's really somebody, a subject matter expert in the materials themselves, coming in and holding your hand and walking through this process by your side in the classroom with your students. So it's less of a tell you what to do and more of a do it with you sort of thing, the I do, we do, you do modality. And it's a lot of we do. And at Hill for Literacy, we're all about we do. That's where partners, we're right alongside you in the classroom.
And part of that is also looking at what's happening in the classroom and being physically in the classroom.
In the classroom, yes,
so
exactly.
We can do this. We want to, and I'm so excited about this question that's coming up in the Q&A. But like we want to provide really flexible solutions that are responsive to what is already happening in schools. And we can't do that without physically being in the school at some point in some way, shape, or form. And so site visits are also part of this so that we're not making recommendations in a vacuum. We're able to see what's happening and not in a like, we gotcha way, but in a like we are here to support and also to celebrate the literacy progress of the students and the teachers.
Thank you both so much for lending your expertise to this conversation. And like we could talk for hours on this. There's so much here to dive into. But so appreciate your leadership on this. And we have an excellent question. I'm glad we have a little bit of time to dive into this because I think you'll both have some compelling answers. But someone asked, what about the content curriculum materials and methodologies that are already in place? They have a lot of money and time behind them already. So, what should we do about that?
Shira, you're excited about this question, but so am I.
Go
Can
for
I
it. You
jump
go for
in?
it.
All right.
Yes, please.
Um, yes, yes, and yes, and yes. Curriculum materials and methodologies are always already in place. And the question is, number one, how much urgency is there to make a change? There's likely a lot of urgency. There's likely a lot that's on fire. And so what do we do? What do we do here? And the thing that I should say from my vantage point at Hill for Literacy is that change is slow. Change is like watching a sloth move. That's my little analogy. Have you seen a sloth move? You know, you blink your eyes and it's moved one claw over 1 inch.
I wish I had a
Um,
sloth video.
I know. So we go into this knowing that it's going to be slow and that the change is slow, but the urgency is great. One thing that I would recommend um, is we can't change everything all at once, nor do we have the money, the resources, the time, the energy to change everything all at once. There's small incremental changes that one can make. As I think about it, the one of the important pieces of this is the professional learning that teachers get that is agnostic of whatever instructional materials and methodologies are already in place. And what I'm speaking to is this idea of a professional learning support for content area teachers, where they are not going to change their curriculum, but they're learning about how to provide supports for students across the content areas. And so I think it's really hard, right? The LIFT program is extraordinary. And we would say to you, if you could get rid of what you have and get the LIFT program, like we would love that. In lieu of that, it's really the training that I think moves the needle. And so, how are you going to get your folks trained in evidence-based methodologies so that they can apply that to whatever program or curriculum that is in front of them?
I will also just like I mean, I want to echo everything that Shira CG said, like 1000%. And I also believe that a huge part of being responsive is aligning to what is already in place and to what's already working. Like there is a very good to great chance that the content curriculum materials and methodologies that are already in place are working to some degree in many ways. And part of being responsive and part of coaching and part of also talking to leadership is looking at what is working. And I'll add, not just talking to leadership, talking to school administrators, talking to teachers, and talking to students. Like what is working in what's already happening, and then how can we align what we do with what is already working. Like at StoryShares, we discuss this a lot, and this is core to Lyft. Like we don't believe in just like putting in another program. Lyft came about because we didn't want our decodable chapter books and our high-low books to just sit on a shelf in a classroom. We wanted them to be like really dynamic. And but then we also don't want to put in a program that's going to create even like a greater load for teachers. And so what we do on the back end is a lot of that alignment work to what's already happening. We make crosswalks with other curricula. We look at assessment data so that older students don't have to get assessed and assessed and assessed again. They can instead, we can align what's already in place at the school with the things that still need to get in place to make that literacy growth happen for older students.
Thank you
That's
both.
great.
Oh, did you have more to say?
Yeah, I mean it's a great point, and thank you for mentioning that also because there's likely a lot that is working.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great question. I'm keeping an eye on the time and we do need to do a couple more things. So if your question didn't get answered, I'm so sorry. Please email us at info@storyshares.org, and we can answer it that way. Shira CG, do you have an email that you want to plug?
Oh, yeah, I'll just put it in the chat. How's that? Will everyone get it? No.
No, there's no chat.
All right.
Um,
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah.
do you just want to say it? People can write it
Yeah,
down.
it's Shira, Shira. I think you see it twice up here at hillforliteracy.org.
Awesome. Thank you. So sorry again if we didn't get to your question, but please reach out. We love to talk about literacy solutions. Also, if you have lingering questions, quick plug for our Elevate workshop. So we are hosting a workshop January 28th at noon. It's going to be 30 minutes, and we have made it intentionally very small to allow for some really dynamic hands-on learning. So we have 15 spots available. And during this workshop, Shira Engel will demonstrate a fluency routine that's ideal for older striving readers. That's part of Elevate. And it's the type of routine that like you can learn it at the workshop and do it with your students tomorrow, the next day. And there'll also be some time for you to pick Shira's brain about your real-time literacy needs. If you would like to join that workshop, you can scan the QR code on the screen, or you could send me an email, melanie@storyshares.org, and I can register you for that. And then I know the Hill has some really exciting things coming up. So, Shira CG, do you want to quickly tell us about those?
Yeah, sure. So we have a speaker series. We have at least one webinar a month. And we're really excited about two upcoming webinars, one at the end of January and one is sort of at the beginning of February. The one at the end of January is going to be very inspiring. It's Terry Noland and Nell Thompson, and talking about really how teachers and leaders come together for literacy impact. It's going to be a very, I think, good feeling webinar, and we welcome you to come and sign up. And then we have a speaker who is coming, Deborah Reed, who's coming in February to talk about statewide teacher training. She did a lot of research in a specific state around a full out statewide teacher training model. And she has a bunch of insights to share what was the outgrowth of that. So you can come to us at hillforliteracy.org to learn more. And I also just want to say we have a brand spanking new website that was just released today. So please come
Go
visit us.
check it out.
Yeah.
Go crash the website with all your traffic. No, don't crash the
Exactly.
website. Absolutely
Come
not.
on over.
But go check it out. It looks amazing. Well, thank you, Shira and Shira. Thank you to our audience. We are so glad you're here. If you want to reach out, info@storyshares.org, Shira@hillforliteracy.org, and appreciate you both so much. And thank you to everyone. Hope you have a fantastic night.